Today's guest, I got on friend of the show and my favorite draft analyst when it comes to this time of year. My guy, NFL Draft Scout on social media, Matt Miller, joins the show. How are we doing today, Matt?
Rio, I'm doing well. It's great to be back on with you. One of my favorite shows to do every offseason, buddy.
Well, absolutely, man. You were my first guest on my YouTube channel. Let's get to it, though, man. It is draft season. The Senior Bowl's in a couple weeks. You're going to be headed down to Mobile, I'm sure. What is the off season like for draft guys? Like, tell people what it's like for you guys during the off season of draft season.
Yeah, Rio. I mean, this is definitely the busy season for us, right? I think, during the fall, you're watching games every weekend. For me, I watch college and NFL religiously. That's all I do, because I feel like it's important for us to not only watch college to, evaluate players for the draft, but also to watch the NFL to know, hey, we got to do mock drafts. We have to talk about these teams. So I need to be watching, the teams. I need to watch the Houston Texans to know what they need. I need to watch the Chicago Bears to know what they need. So we watch a ton of games during the fall and early winter, but then this time of year, that really starts to shift. It's like you've studied for the tests. Now it's time to take it, basically. So it's a lot of having time to watch film. This time of year is huge, honestly, because there aren't games every weekend. So for me with the quarterbacks, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, Bryce Young, those guys, it's all done. All the season's done. So now it's okay. I can actually watch film and have time to study it a little bit better, maybe to go through multiple games, multiple times, So this is a busy time of year for a lot of catch up, but also it's when we start to make the content. I have a 2-round mock draft coming out soon. I know my buddy Mel Kiper has a mock draft coming out very, very soon. So it's definitely that time of year.
It's definitely that time of year, and it's hella impressive to watch you guys because you can tell you guys do your homework. A lot of people, they get mad and like, oh, what's a draft expert? But you guys can literally go from pick 1 to pick 256 and talk about scheme, fit, and how they'll translate to the league. And it is so impressive to watch it. It makes fans like myself get extra into this draft season and stuff like that. But you brought up the quarterback names. It's always the buzz conversation going in the draft season, the quarterback class. Last year, the position wasn't valued. And for the first time in a long time, we actually saw the league sit on their hands and say, you know what? We're not going to value this draft class. We'll wait till next year. Tell me about the 2023 draft class.
Well, it's better than last year's. That's for sure, right? There's
Easily.
Not really a comparison. I think, last year we only saw one guy drafted in the first round. We saw 2 in the top 75. It'll be different this year. We have 3 quarterbacks who are legitimate top 10 players: Bryce Young from Alabama, CJ Stroud from Ohio State, Will Levis from Kentucky. Then you have Anthony Richardson from Florida, who's a little bit polarizing, but has phenomenal potential. And then there's even a good, I guess you could call it third tier, guys like Tanner McKee from Stanford, Hendon Hooker from Tennessee, Jake Haener from Fresno State. So it's a much better quarterback class, not just because we have legitimate top 10 players, but I also think the depth of this class is a lot better than last year. So obviously the Commanders are in an interesting spot because they won too many games to be in the top 10. I know that's something you'll talk a lot about this offseason, but I think the good news is there are 3 rookie starters at quarterback in this class, and then there's another player in Richardson from Florida who's just incredibly intriguing if you are willing to be patient and if you're also willing to maybe cater your system to him a little bit early on.
Hell yeah. Anthony Richardson, he fits in that class where he's hit the genetic lottery. He's 6'4", at 230, runs like Lamar. He's has an arm like Mahomes. He's Josh Allen's size, but he's played no football, and he's raw as hell as a passer. Mm-hmm. But if you hit on him, you got a guy. You got a guy. Absolutely. Hell yeah.
If he hits, you have a franchise quarterback. I think the scary thing with Richardson is if he doesn't hit where he's at right now, he's like a low-level starter probably, because he's a great runner. He's got a huge arm, but his accuracy and decision-making are just all over the place. It is like watching Josh Allen his first year at Wyoming, where you saw all the tools and all the talent. Mm-hmm. You're like, man, this guy needs some work. So Richardson's one of those players I really thought he might go back to Florida and try to develop, but hard to fault a guy for getting a first-round paycheck to develop in the NFL instead of doing it in Florida. So I think – if you just want to talk traits, he has the best upside of any quarterback in the class. But I think he has the lowest entry point as well, to where the other guys have been doing it a lot longer, at least 2-year starters. For Richardson, just a 1-year starter at Florida. So he hasn't been exposed to a whole lot yet.
Hell yeah, it probably has the lowest floor, but the ridiculously highest ceiling, though,
Yeah.
because you hit on that guy, you have a guy for a long time. What's the highest you can see him going in the draft? Are we talking top 20, top 25?
Yeah, I think top 20, top 25. I mean, you know how it goes. Supply and demand changes everything. And we have to wait and see what happens with some of these veteran quarterbacks. Does Aaron Rodgers get traded? You know, what happens with Jimmy Garoppolo? What are the Jets going to do with Zach Wilson and Mike White, that situation? So where's Derek Carr go? There's a lot of dominoes that are going to fall in the next couple of weeks, probably around the Super Bowl, that will help figure that out. But I still think there are obviously more teams that need quarterbacks than there are quarterbacks, and that's great news for Anthony Richardson. And honestly, it might be why he came out this year instead of next year, which also looks like a really good quarterback class. So he can say, you know, I mean, a team like Tampa in the early 20s, I have a hard time seeing him get past a team like that just because the top three are going to be gone. And I think there's a lot of clubs that are going to be desperate for a quarterback. And as we talked about, his traits are phenomenal. It's just a matter of believing in your system that you can develop him and that you can cater something to what he does early on if he has to play.
Oh, yeah. And another guy that's similar in the genetic lottery build. I look at a guy who looks like the prototypical rom-com quarterback. I look at Will Levis out of Kentucky. He looks like the guy that wears the varsity jacket every Friday, 6'4", 230. He sounds like a jock. He looks like a tool. And he has all the tools needed to be an NFL quarterback. But for some reason, statistically, he didn't pop like people thought he would this year. And in his 7 games versus the SEC, he has not went over 230 like once in him. What is Will Levis at this point, and what is his ceiling? And is the reason he's so highly touted because of the tools and because he comes from an NFL translatable offense? Like, tell me about Will Levis.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think it's one of those things where you have to be careful because you don't want to sound like you're making excuses for the guy. But, I mean, he had, I think, 3 different offensive coordinators during his time at Kentucky. We're not talking about, an elite level of supporting cast. His running back, Chris Rodriguez, will be drafted probably late day 2, early day 3, but he didn't have, superstar wide receivers. I think the changing in the play calling, the scheme definitely affected him to where he didn't take that senior jump that we expected, from what we saw junior year. I think with Will, the hard thing is a lot of people are going to say, well, it's bad accuracy. I don't think it's bad accuracy. I think it's bad decision-making because when he makes the right decision, the ball goes to the right spot. I mean, he had a lot of games where he's throwing like 4 or 5 incompletions, but like 2 of those are going to get picked off or 3 of those are going to get picked off. So I think the accuracy is okay. It's the decision-making, which I do think you can clean up. I think that can get better. So I'll tell you, there are teams that love him. And I've been saying that for a year. That's not a new thing. That's not like, late draft hype or anything like that. A year ago, I mean, you can find clips on ESPN of me saying teams love him, like love him. And I think you're seeing a player that they love, the work ethic, the athleticism that you mentioned, the arm strength, everything that he brings to the table outside of those interceptions is really good. And I think there are definitely teams that think they can probably clean that up a little bit.
Oh, for sure. What is your NFL comp for Will Levis? Because I feel like he gives me a lot of pre-ACL tear Carson Wentz vibes. Like he gives me like early Carson Wentz energy. That's what I feel like his ceiling could look like. What's your comp for Will Levis?
Yeah, mine's Matthew Stafford. I understand Wentz. I think Wentz might be like it's hard because Carson has been 2 different players in his career, right? So I think Levis, that could be like, which Carson are you getting, right? I think you could see it from the turnover perspective, yes. And somewhat with Carson, as you guys know all too well, it was the timing of the turnovers was the problem more than like the number of the turnovers. So I definitely see that. I think Will probably has a higher ceiling. He's a faster processor. That was the biggest knock on Carson coming out was he was kind of slow to see things because he was coming out of that North Dakota State offense, and he never really got there, never really got it sped up. So I think with Will, he's probably ahead of that. But I think physically speaking, they are pretty similar.
Matthew Stafford, though, I like that. And I could see a team like the Colts and Chris Ballard and Irsay falling in love with him and him being like, if they do a trade up to number 1 with the Chicago Bears, I can see Levis being the target because I love me some Bryce Young. It's hard for me to see a lot of teams trading up for number 1 or taking him that high because of his size. And we're going to get to him in just a second. But CJ Stroud, he checks all the boxes. He doesn't run a lot, and he comes from a non-translatable offense at Ohio State. But as a passer, he seems to check every box possible. What do we like? Yeah. Are people overthinking CJ Stroud?
I think so, but that happens often. There's a
Mhm.
reason Zach Wilson went number 2 overall, and teams
Yeah.
overthink things. And I think with CJ, there's a lot of helmet scouting going on. Like you said,
Oh yeah.
obviously you have to be mindful of the scheme, but I think people have missed just how accurate he is. How well he layers the ball, what he's able to set up yards after catch. Yes, he does have a great scheme. Yes, he has a great supporting cast, but like he still has to throw that ball. And he still has to get it to where his guy can make a play on it. And he does that very well. I mean, he consistently gets through his progressions. And we saw against Georgia, which is a great defense, a great scheme. We saw him use his legs to set up the pass. We saw him use his legs to get out of trouble. So I don't have as many questions on CJ Stroud as I did at the beginning of the year. I know that. He's my number 4 overall player. He's my number 2 overall quarterback. And I think if you're the Texans, the Colts, the Panthers, the Commanders, whoever it might be, I mean, I do think he's the type of quarterback that can elevate a team and that could be a franchise quarterback.
Hell yeah. CJ Stroud, he checks all of the boxes for me. I've seen comps range from like low end being Jared Goff for Dak Prescott, the high end being Joe Burrow. What's a good pro comp for CJ Stroud?
Yeah, I mean, mine has been Dak Prescott because I think we're seeing a guy who's poised, accurate. He doesn't have the strongest arm. He's mobile while not being super fast. Physically tough, mentally tough, a good leader. I know right now, we're recording this. Dak is almost like he's down right now. People are down on Dak
Very.
Prescott. I still think that he's a very good quarterback, and I think CJ could maybe exceed that. Joe Burrow's in that area where I just don't compare people to Joe Burrow.
Oh yeah, Joe.
he's special. So that's no slight on CJ Stroud to not compare those two. I'm not putting anybody up there with Joe right now.
Joe Cool is different, man. Just whenever you say the names Mahomes and Allen, Burrow should be right there. And Burrow honestly
Yeah,
could be said before Josh Allen if we're going off of what we see on Sundays,
right.
because Joe gets it done. And which leaves us with the number 1 quarterback in this class, which should be undisputed, undebatable,
Yeah.
Bryce Young. The only red flag I literally hear anyone talk about is his stature and his frame. I don't see much of any weaknesses on the football field in between the ears, character-wise. Talk about Bryce Young.
Yeah, I mean, if he were 6'2", 220, he would be the surefire number 1 pick, and the Chicago Bears would have teams giving up a ransom to come get him. But he's 6 foot. He's probably going to be 200 pounds. I do think we're overthinking it a little bit with him as well.
Definitely.
His poise is fantastic. His field vision is fantastic. I think his arm's stronger than CJ Stroud's, actually. I think he's very, very mobile. I think he's great. He's my number 2 prospect, number 1 quarterback. Surefire. Like if I'm the Houston Texans, I'm finding a way to get to 1 to get him because I think he's that special in terms of, especially like not just what he does on the field, but like the type of player you're getting. Somebody that can, lead your franchise, can lead your locker room. I know Nick Saban has nothing but amazing things to say about Bryce Young. And that's going to definitely have some weight in this whole thing. So you're right. If he were 2 inches taller and 15 pounds heavier, we would be talking about Andrew Luck category, Joe Burrow category. It would be best quarterback since XYZ type of talk for Bryce Young because of all he accomplished at Alabama and the traits that he brings to the field.
I'm just hoping that the NFL, like they just group think and overthink it, and he just comes sliding down the board. I don't think he's gonna slide past like 5, but it would be great because
Right.
my Washington Commanders, we're stuck in the worst place to be in this NFL shit. The worst place to be is in the middle. We're never good enough to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
We're never bad enough to pick top 5, even top 10. We're always in the late teens, and it's the worst place to be because we never are able to find and figure out the quarterback position. We have a guy on the roster that we may have accidentally stumbled upon something in. How did you evaluate Sam going into last year's class, and how would he stack up if he was in this year's quarterback class? Sam Howell.
Yeah, Sam was interesting because there was all the first round buzz and it kind of died. He started the year rough last year with some multiple interception games, I believe. I looked at him in the way that, he's an undersized quarterback who did have a good arm, who had okay mobility, not great mobility, but he threw a great deep ball. I actually thought at the Senior Bowl, he looked really, really good. So I think by the time the draft came around, I had like a mid-round grade on him. Higher than where he got drafted. I know the grade was higher than that for sure. I thought, week 18, he played well, well enough that you have to see what he has. I mean, obviously you probably want to bring in some competition, and if there's a player you like more available, you have to go get them. But he has the tools. And I think with Sam, the thing is, like, he needs players around him, obviously, like we're seeing Brock Purdy do right now. He needs guys around him making plays. The good news is you have those. You have Terry McLaurin. You have Jahan Dotson. There's some weapons in Washington. Do they need more? Probably, but there's a good starting point there. So I think, Sam, I would say could be a starting quarterback. I would probably, default to like the low end starting quarterback in the NFL, but we see guys outplay those expectations all the time. So very small sample size right now. I would say the traits probably are what are, there's nothing remarkable there. You're usually looking for like 1 to 2 standout traits to believe a guy's a starting quarterback. Again, Brock Purdy has flipped this whole world upside down right now. So you almost, the more you talk about guys, like, oh, he doesn't have a great arm, he's not very mobile. It's like, well, there's this dude in San Francisco that's won like 8 straight games. So obviously, the scheme is going to help a lot. But I do think Sam deserves a shot at that starting quarterback job off what we saw in week 18 and the work that it sounds like he put in all season long.
Hell yeah, because I could argue that he was ready weeks before that. And I think there are coaches and players on the team who are like, why the hell didn't we see this rookie? Because one thing, he does have a big arm. That's like about the only like crazy trait that stands out about him. He has a huge arm and he can make all the throws on the field. What would he be, like your quarterback 5 in this year's class?
Probably, 5 or 6. I really like Hendon Hooker. The ACL injury, messed that up. And he is a little bit older of a prospect coming out of Tennessee, but 5 or 6 is about right. And I think, again, having, hindsight helps because I do think we all get into that. We nitpick, we overthink guys instead of going like, all right, junior year, this dude we had talked about as a first round pick. He loses 2 running backs. He loses 2 wide receivers, has kind of a rough year. I don't think he played as poorly as some of the narrative was, but, obviously, the NFL kind of looked down on him because he fell as far as he did in the draft.
Oh, yeah. And Hendon Hooker, 6-year super senior and coming off an ACL tear. First time he touches the NFL, he's going to be 26 years old. I could see a lot of teams taking that off the board, right?
I think so. Probably. I mean, it depends, how far the ACL how far along he looks when we get to medical checks at the combine and stuff. But you might not lose your entire rookie year, but I think, it's gonna knock him to some degree. And I think the thing is, quarterbacks are playing longer than ever. Not just Tom Brady, but everybody's playing longer than ever. I think we're finding better ways to extend careers, so that might help someone like Hendon Hooker, who is super high character, great arm. I mean, the deep ball at Tennessee was flying when he was under center. So I think those things will help him. Whereas if he were, somebody who was trait deficient, you would look at the age and the injury and say, all right, like he's off the board for us.
All right, so I want you to put your GM cap on for me real quick. We're gonna try to fix these Washington Commanders quarterback problem that has been there my whole fucking life as a fan. I'm now 31 and I've seen 29 starting quarterbacks in the last 22 years. So Ron is the coach, de facto president, GM guy here. We have Sam Howell under contract. We're going to cut Wentz, and we're probably going to cut Heineke. We could bring him back for the cheap. Honestly, I'd want to move on from it because I don't want to hear fans chant for a backup quarterback in week 5 when my young quarterback has a rough game. I'm cool with it. I would honestly start it over. Do you go the draft route and try to move up from 16 to get in on one of these top 3 guys? Do you go say well, it seems the Packers aren't going to trade Rodgers in conference. So are you going to look at a Derek Carr? Are you getting in on the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes? Are you like what would be your plan for Washington at quarterback?
Well, if Lamar's actually available, that changes things, right? I mean, I think that's one of the big things is you have to check and be like, okay, is he really available? If he's really available, then you send 16 and a first round pick next year and you got your quarterback, right? If that option's off the table, Aaron Rodgers is 39. I didn't think he played that well this year anyway. I'm not going there because that's such a Band-Aid. Same with Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is actually underrated, but it's just a short-term fix. So, Rio, what I would actually do is I would hold steady with Sam Howell. I would bring in, like I said, a veteran, bring in like an Andy Dalton, somebody that can be, that voice for Sam Howell, can be that helper, like Colt McCoy has been in Arizona. And then if it doesn't work, I think the beauty is if it doesn't work, next year's quarterback class also looks really good because you have Caleb Williams, Drake May, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Quinn Ewers. It's early and a lot will change, absolutely. But it does look like a year where, okay, if we don't get our guy this year, you got to feel good about next year. Now, of course, Washington's a unique situation because the team could be for sale. Who knows what's going to happen there? So you don't know how much, job security you have, I guess. But for Ron and that crew, I do think you could look at it and say, all right, if we roll with Sam Howell, who has some momentum, we've got good playmakers around him. We can use pick 16 to, whether it's to bolster the offensive line or to, bolster the secondary. I would go that route. And then if it doesn't work, okay, we're in a good position for a quarterback in 2024.
Hell yeah, that's my plan as well. My plan is I already started #Howell23. Just give Sam Howell the keys. Give him the full offseason, all the reps. Bring in some jag-ass Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater, the likes of that kind of guy, and just let Howell cook for 2023. It's a win-win. You're either going to have your guy and y'all are good to go and we're good at the quarterback position, or he's going to stink and we're going to have a high pick in a quarterback-rich draft in 2024. Right. So I don't want us back in a situation where we get a guy that's going to come in and win us another 7-8 games. Like, I need us to be good or bad in 2024. And with hopefully new ownership coming in, Ron could be in a lame duck situation here. And that's why it's harder for him to find a really good offensive coordinator candidate to take Scott Turner's vacancy here at OC. And you're really selling a job where all you can say is, we got Sam Howell here. It seems like a hard sell, but I think, like you said, we go with Howell and a vet. And at 16, it's either cornerback or tackle. And I wanted to ask you before you go about the cornerback position. The names everybody knows: Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr., Keely Ringo, Cam Smith. But the riser everybody's talking about is this kid out of Illinois, Devon Witherspoon. How good is Devon Witherspoon? And is he in the conversation for first cornerback off the board?
Yeah, he definitely is. I think his film was just some of the best. Like we talked about early in this interview, this time of year, we all have time. We have time to actually catch up and watch film and talk to scouts and kind of bounce notes off each other. And I think that's why we're seeing Witherspoon rise. The Senior Bowl is going to be huge for him next week, obviously. I think there's a chance he's that top corner drafted. And then, as you mentioned, Christian Gonzalez, who transferred from Colorado to Oregon, he had never had an interception at Colorado 2 years, goes to Oregon, and he becomes a ball hawk, but he's just juiced up with traits. He's fast, he's long, he's physical. Joey Porter Jr. has obvious, amazing NFL lineage and plays like a first rounder. If his last name was Smith, you would still say this guy's a first rounder. So those three are really good. I think after that, there's a drop off. Keely Ringo didn't play that well this year.
Yeah, his tape doesn't do it for me.
But all the traits are phenomenal, right? So it's like this guy runs a 4.3 at 6'2", 215. Maybe he should play free safety. Maybe that would help out a little bit. Cam Smith, South Carolina, is good as well. So it's not only is it a top end good corner class, but it's a really deep group as well.
In the tackle class, probably headed by Paris Johnson Jr. and Broderick Jones. Yeah. What do you feel about the tackle class?
Yeah, it's good. Paris Johnson from Ohio State, Broderick Jones, Georgia. Peter Skronsky from Northwestern, you could throw in there. Whether you see him as a guard or a tackle, I think teams are going to be divided because he's a little bit on the shorter side. But it's a good group. Those three should be top 15 picks. They really should. Not just because of the importance of the position, but the way they play. They're very different. I think that's one thing that's nice is Johnson's a little more athletic finesse. Jones is just like an old school ass kicker. And the Skronsky's, mauler who can play all over. So all three are definitely capable of being that first tackle. And I think all three will be rookie starters as well.
All right, we're at the first pick of the draft. When the clock goes off, are the Chicago Bears on the clock or did they trade back? And who is the better prospect out of Jalen Carter or Will Anderson to you? 2 questions.
Yeah, I think the Bears trade back. I just think Ryan Poles knows that team has too many holes to not try to maximize the position they're in. And the beauty is you don't need a quarterback because you have Justin Fields. So you can slide back, let someone like Houston or Indy or Carolina or whomever come up and get a quarterback and you're still in good shape. To your second question, I think they're very, very close. I give the edge to Will Anderson. Number one, he was healthy this year. Jalen Carter was hurt. And I think Will is just like special quickness around the edge. I'm watching football on Sunday. I'm looking at Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa and the way they impact the game. And defensive tackles can have that impact. Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, those guys get it done. But give me that outside pass rusher as the tiebreaker. I think the positional value pushes Will Anderson over Jalen Carter.
Perfect, man. It's divisional weekend coming up. I know your squads. I know your history. You come from 49ers and Chiefs. Is that the Super Bowl matchup we're looking at again? How do you feel championship weekend is going to play out?
Yeah, you're right. I've been a Niners fan my whole life, but I live in Missouri, so my wife and kids, friends, everyone is a Chiefs fan except for me, which is has made this a tense household right now because I think everybody knows that matchup, that rematch is possible. I actually picked Cincinnati and Philadelphia. Maybe I'm just maybe I'm unintentionally setting myself up, because if you pick those teams to win and they win, you're like, okay, you were right. You're happy with your picks. If you pick those teams and you're wrong, that means your team's won, right? So it works both ways is how that lines up. But yeah, I know everyone here is pretty excited for Sunday to see what happens. But I love Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. I think Philly and Cincinnati are two model franchises with the way they've built those squads. So I'm just excited to get to the end of the end of the season here and see what happens.
Oh, yeah, man. That would be nice to see because it would be a matchup that we didn't expect, a matchup we're not used to, and it's not the same old characters as usual, man. But I appreciate you coming on and chopping it up with me, man. I know draft season gets really intense for you, man. Anything you want to plug or let the people know before you go?
Yeah, we'll be doing a ton of coverage from the Senior Bowl starting January 30th. And then right after the Senior Bowl, I'll have that 2-round mock draft on ESPN that people can check out.
All right, y'all go check out the guy at NFL Draft Scout on Twitter. Until next time, y'all know the vibes. Hail to the Washington Commanders. Like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.